You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex Gee, a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. Gee.
You know what, as a kid, one of the things I loved at year's end was watching all of the clips of highlights from the year. And so now that I have my own podcast, I can do it. So this past year has been very exciting. We've dropped probably 35 or 36 episodes, and they've each been special in their own way. But I've listened closely, and I've taken just a few highlights from about 6 or 7 of the shows that just really stand out. Some make very poignant and salient points. Others are just humorous. Others are just extremely insightful and thought-provoking. And so I want to share some of these highlights of some of my best clips from podcasts this year. Back in April of this year, I did a really interesting podcast that was called Starbucks, Donald Trump, and Ventriloquist Dolls. I had guests in the studio, and we talked about the notion that Donald Trump had somehow created this polarization in America. But for African Americans, we've been saying this has been the sentiment of America for centuries. And America now has someone who can voice those things and make it okay for others. One of my guests that day was my sister Lilada, who's a podcaster, an author, and a social entrepreneur. Take a listen to what she said that day. So why is it that our white colleagues think that these issues have gone away? Now, part of this is they've lived in a world where perhaps people didn't talk about it, and they're not like their grandparents where they saw rules and laws that kept us separate. But I have experienced people who just say, come on, Alex, just admit it. Look at Oprah, look at Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, President Obama. Come on, we've made strides. And I know that there are people that have gotten to be in key place. We've always had our Billie Holidays. We've always had our stars. But we're dealing with people, particularly in our context where we live, who really believe that this stuff went underground or that it was an issue of the South and just could not believe that it's still alive, and think that Trump and radical Republicans and Tea Party folks have single-handedly brought all this stuff back. Mm-hmm. I'm just still saying it never went away.
Right. And I think this is why racism is so pervasive, because white people don't want to look at what they've created. And, I recently shared that, white people always ask us, I don't know what to do about racism. What should I do? And it's like, why are you asking me to tell you how to dismantle a system that you created?
Right.
And the one that I'm being oppressed by. And I think when we can stick our heads in a hole like an ostrich and not look around, there's no culpability, there's no accountability, so that it becomes someone else's problem to fix, somebody else's problem to manage and figure out. I know there's a picture of Trump on some magazine where I think he's draped in the American flag, and someone said, oh, I don't want people to think this is America. I'm like, this is America. And if we embrace that, then we can move forward. But until we really embrace the fact that America is built upon racism, that privilege is still a thing, that white people are still profiting from the broken bodies of black people, then we can never move forward.
Right.
If we want to get to the kumbaya. And I'm not singing no damn song right now.
No, you don't. You're not even going to tune up.
No.
But how about Michael? How about Michael rode the boat ashore? You ready for that one?
No,
not that one. Now, Mr. K, I know you used to live in the D.C. area, so I like to sort of kick
I've met
things
Trump.
towards you. I bet you have. Is this the pendulum swinging to the other end? Is this pushback? I mean, all of this a pushback from having a black president?
I think it's a big part of it. I think that there is a large cross section of white America that in some way feels like they're losing something when they see us gaining something.
Good point. Good point.
And they don't. Those are often the people that don't necessarily live around us, or if they do, they don't connect with us, they don't talk with us, they don't deal with us. And we're seeing that it is a large percentage of this country. Look at all the people that voted for him. Now, I don't want to say all the people who voted for him thought that way, but I think of those who support him still. If you support that man still, to me, in my mind, you've got some serious problems.
Right.
And when you think about it, too, a lot of people don't want to, they don't understand that when he talks about making America great again, And he's talking about taking us backwards. If you
Right.
take black people backwards, you're taking our progress away.
Right.
Because ever since we came to this country, it's been a sordid experience. And then when we got to civil rights and we started to make some real progress, you're talking about taking me back?
Right.
Taking me back to where?
Too many
is my
uppity
question.
Negroes need to be put back in our place. And I think the scary thing is that it's not necessarily the white people we don't deal with. It's the ones that we do deal with that smile in our face but have a different mentality, when they're behind our back. And I was sharing with you, Alex, the other day, I think when you look at the white women voters who have supported Trump, that to me they remind me of the helicopter moms in the schools, making sure that their kids get everything, every resource, every, opportunity.
Snack.
Everything. And I think it's the fear of these white women that somehow their children won't get something that they think that they have the privilege and right to have. I think their support of Trump is their mama bear coming out to protect their kids and what they think their kids deserve.
I've created Black Like Me to give voice to Black Americans who are doing tremendous things around the nation, around the world. I mean, hence your invitation. But it's also so that our non-Black people can listen in and experience life a little bit from our perspective. We didn't put Trump in office. We didn't create these realities, and so they can't ride on our coattails or just say, "Yeah, you go tell them, you go get them, you go challenge Starbucks." What I loved about let me just slide Starbucks in for just a minute. I love the fact that white people were standing up. Now that's what you should do, because Black folks have been standing up for folks a long time, but I think we got to see more of this, because if the people doing the filming and the responding were just Black, it would give the country a chance to say, they're just trying to cover for each other. Now, the fact that white people are standing up for Black people, still maddening to some folks, because we were talking about this, earlier today, that there are folks that want to boycott Starbucks because they're closing their stores to provide some training. And if you don't think that we need to do this in this day and time, you're just really crazy.
You don't deserve the book.
Right. So I think the message we got to get to our white allies is you have to speak up. You have to vote differently, because to your point, Lilada, white women he couldn't have done this without the white female vote.
So can we go back to Starbucks just for a second?
Sure.
You're talking about how some people are upset that they're closing to do this diversity training. And I think what I want to put a spotlight on is white space in America.
Tell me more.
Well, people want the black coffee in Starbucks, but they don't want the black people. And so there's so many white spaces in America, and Starbucks is one of them. Of course, it's not that they say you can't come in if you're not Black, but I think that's part of the reason why these Black men that were just sitting there were pointed out, even though there were white people that were in the store the same day
because people couldn't imagine
who
why
weren't buying anything.
Because Black people might come in and buy their stuff and leave, or go through the drive-thru and leave, but actually congregating two folks, it's a trap. It's a gang of them. It's two of them.
Right. And it's two Black men. And so there's a lot of white spaces still in America that aren't open to us. Now, Starbucks is one of them. But one of the most unfortunate white spaces still in America are public schools.
Sure.
Where we have our Black kids bus there, but they're not really welcome there.
Sure. And they're not reflected in the leadership and the administration,
or the curriculum, or the books, or anything of that nature.
One of the things that I really enjoy about being a podcast host is that we get to humanize news, because typically we'll read something from a smartphone or from a newspaper, we'll listen to it through the television, but it's really through the lens of the reporter, and not really spending quality time with individuals who live within that reality. And so bringing in police officers or elected officials or judges to talk about how they see the issues that we're wrestling with in the news has been really interesting. And because of some of the reaction that we're getting, I'm beginning to understand that we're helping people to have a paradigm shift about how they understand these very important issues. Back in July, my special guest was Shelia Stubbs, a local politician who was running for state assembly. Few months after she was on my show, she got a lot of national attention because while she was campaigning with her young daughter and her 71-year-old mom, someone in her district called the police on the three of these women because they said a drug deal was going on. Chris Cuomo spoke with Shelia Stubbs on his television show Primetime.
Sorry to meet you this way, Shelia Stubbs. Obviously, we're not going to play around with what the suggestion was, but what does this incident mean to you?
This incident was unacceptable. This incident has been outrageous to me. I was embarrassed, I was humiliated, and it tells me that racism still exists, and implicit bias is something that we all need to be a part of, and it's unacceptable, and I was racially profiled and stereotyped. My mother and my daughter.
Implicit bias. This looks more like explicit. Did you believe the officer handled it the right way?
I had some concerns with the officer's approach because I felt I needed to show her 3 different ways. Validation, it certainly could have been worse. But again, I think that I should not have had to prove why I was there. What if I didn't have a walk list? I was a candidate. And when that happened, I didn't go back to doors the rest of the evening. I did not do doors for 24 hours.
Why?
It was awful because I felt so degraded. I felt so humiliated. I felt insulted. My daughter was asking questions. Also, the officer had approached my mom by saying, "Why are you there?" So my family, we needed to get it together. My husband's a pastor. I'm a pastor, so we prayed. I cried. I just could not go out to another door. I was scared. I was afraid of what was going to happen if someone else was going to call the cops on me. So I needed to get myself together. So our team, Team Stubbs, decided to pull me away for doors for 24 hours.
What do you want the person who made the phone call to know about you?
First and foremost, I'm not a drug dealer. I am a wonderful person. I am a mom. I was a teacher. I'm an elected official. And I deserve to go where I choose to go. And what you did, you put me and my family in a position that outcomes could have been differently. I couldn't express how I truly felt from perception. I watched neighbors come out of their house. I watched neighbors peep out their windows. I was degraded. I was degraded and humiliated. How dare you do that to my family? It's unacceptable. And now I am your state representative. And it's work that needs to be done.
Well, look, I do not see a silver lining in a situation like this. What happened was wrong. On that list of things that you describe yourself as, you're also someone who rose above a bad situation, and you won. And there is no winning in a situation like what happened to you. You made it through that, you won your race, and now you can lead the way that you think is best. And that's a reward in and of itself. But Shelia Stubbs, I'm sorry I had to meet you this way, but it's important that these stories get out, that we highlight what is wrong and we highlight what is right. So thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless the state of Wisconsin. God bless the United States. And it was God, the reason I won this race. I give him all the praise, the glory, and the victory.
Now, you can tell from that Chris Cuomo primetime clip that Shelia Stubbs has a very strong voice. But before the election and before that national attention, she was a guest on Black Like Me to talk about the importance of black voters and the power, the ability to actually shift an election. What is it going to take for us to get more black people out to the polls, just in general? Because, you know, like when President Obama showed up, was on the ballot, we showed up. So just like a 20-second thing, like what do you want to say to folks who are black listeners or friends of black listeners, people who think it's not important to vote? Just can you just say something about the importance of just the black vote on even local elections? Because the presidential ones are not just the important ones, but the local elections. Just can you say something about the importance?
The black vote will make the difference. That's it. Our votes
we
are
can
not
swing
being
election.
counted.
You're saying we can swing election?
We can make seats happen for us. Our vote. That's where the momentum has been with the Democratic Party. It has been the black woman's vote that brought the momentum to Alabama,
we saw,
Virginia.
I was going to say Alabama.
Been jealous. It matters. And when I knock on the doors, do black people understand the power that we have?
I had a really interesting conversation with police officer Corey Saffold back in April about the paradox of being a black police officer. And he talks about how black men are treated differently even when they're police officers. So on one occasion, he was acting out the full duty of a police officer and letting a citizen know something that they had done wrong. And they called the police on the police because he had the audacity to tell her that what she was doing was wrong.
what you just mentioned is the actual case that happened to me. I
Right.
was driving down the street and a lady's dog ran right in front of the squad car, and I had to slam on brakes. My intention was to, provide some education. Hey,
Right.
It's not safe. City ordinance does say our dogs should be on leash. Can you please put your dog on a leash? Just how it is. Very professional. Very
Sure.
no intention on writing a citation or anything like that. And who are you to question me? I'll have your job. I'm like,
I'll have your job.
And you know what they're getting at when they say I'll have your job. You know exactly
Yes.
what they're suggesting.
Right.
I'll have your job. Who are you to? And she called my supervisor. Because at first I'm thinking like, okay, I'm here giving you a warning, and you just blatantly tell me you're not going to put your dog on a leash.
I'm going to call your boss.
And I'm going to call your boss. So you're telling me as an officer that you're going to disregard this city ordinance that I am responsible for enforcing. So if you're not going to do that, then I'm going to give you a citation. I mean, what else am I supposed to do? And she called my boss.
And you know this because your boss talked to you about it.
Exactly. And I actually got pulled aside
and asked
about it.
See, okay.
So,
I'm actually feeling my blood pressure going up right now. I mean, because you getting up, she takes your badge and basically takes your authority. But I mean, when we think about our streets and our communities, regardless of how we feel about it, and of course, a police officer with a badge, we're taught to respect them for no other reason for our own safety, for our lives. Sure. But they are a form of authority. This is how I was trained growing up. But I would never think to say something to a police officer in the line of their duty. Now, if they're talking to me disrespectfully or something, I will say, who's your supervisor? Because I happen to know the chief of police. So I'll play that card, that power card. That's not even a black card. That's just a power card. But I would never say to someone who's telling me to turn my music down or put my dog on a leash, I'm going to have your job.
Right. And especially if the officer is very courteous, very professional, and is talking to you, don't have any intentions on giving you a ticket or fine or anything like that. Is just saying, hey, can you, I almost hit your dog. I mean, pretty much what I was saying.
So she threatened an officer. I mean, if she's talking about taking your job, wasn't that threatening you?
I mean, it was threatening me in the sense it wasn't threatening me.
No, not bodily harm.
Well, right, yeah. It was a direct threat. It was basically letting me know, like, you are not in any position to tell me what to do.
With my dog.
Keep in mind, remember who you are. Remember that you are black. Remember that I am white. And even though you're wearing that badge, I'm still going to show you that I am in more of a position of power than you are.
And she
even though you're enforcing, and she
proved it.
And she proved that by calling my supervisor, and my supervisor actually calling me in on something this petty. So it was yeah.
Ooh.
It was definitely an eye opener. This was early in my career, so it was definitely an eye opener.
The show exists so that white people can listen in on our conversations and understand what we're saying differently. My brother's a police officer. You're a police officer. I don't think the police officers should be targets, but we have a problem in this country, and black men seem to be in the crosshairs of these in this situation, and we have to acknowledge that.
We have to acknowledge it. And like you said, we're talking about the Tamearra Dyson, the Walter Scott, the LeVar Jones. These are
Tony Robinson.
Tony Robinson
here in our city. I'm a consummate carnivore, but one night I was watching the Food Network and I saw this vegan soul food chef, a sister out of the Bay Area, who wanted to take the great taste of black soul food, but prepare it in a way that was healthy so that black people could live longer while eating the food. I reached out to her and she responded right away. This episode was one of my favorite podcasts of this past year because you could hear the love coming through her voice that she puts in her food. And so I want you to just listen to what she talks about caring for folks. I think you'll get exactly what I mean. I am really, really honored to have Miss Tamearra Dyson on my show this morning. What's the plug right now for our folks to think about vegan and the health benefits? What would you say would be the top?
I think I will say this. I was never, as I said, I was never a big meat eater. I've actually never had a steak. So a lot of the, traditional meats that, folks are accustomed to, I have actually, never experienced.
Sure.
But I will say this, that when you are just picture being the best version of yourself. And with that, fasting, like I'm fasting right now, keeping your body clean. Most of the diseases start in the colon. And, meat is not how, it used to be. It's completely different. And a lot of it is just chemicalized and, genetically modified, and I don't even know if you can actually even call it meat anymore.
Wow.
But just picture being the best version of yourself, and you have to treat your body and your soul and your mind. All of these things are connected. And in order to think at your very best, I believe, and I know that I'm at my optimum when when I'm fasting regularly, and just, treating my body right, because even though, you can be a vegan, but you can still be, unhealthy if you're, are you eating late? Are you eating, big meals at 12 midnight and then going to sleep, 5 minutes later? That's not a healthy lifestyle either. But I would say that, when your body is light, and what I find from a lot of, guests who come into the restaurant who are meat eaters or who we have helped to convert over to veganism, they say they just feel better.
That's
when
what I hear.
It's easier to get up in the morning after they have had our meals, and it's southern food, so you're getting healthy servings and all that. But they said they just feel good.
I knew that when I launched this podcast that I would voice things that are very important to African American people, and that I would talk about things we encounter on a daily basis. But I've really been surprised by the onslaught of comments and downloads by white listeners who have really shown their hunger to understand what it's like to navigate life as an African American or as a person of color in America today. And so I really appreciate that pleasant surprise. And it's been great to come to the realization that this show is not merely entertainment or insightful, but it's become a real resource for people who have no other way of learning or understanding what we're teaching or talking about on this show. Scott Jackson has been a friend of mine for about 20 years. We took an overseas trip together to the Holy Land, and he and I had a chance to talk on the plane. And I asked jokingly, "Hey, Scott, do you know any black people?" And he said, "My father." And he said it with such seriousness that I knew that he wasn't trying to match my craziness. And I started to ask him about his story, and it was amazing. I want you to listen to this clip. I love the fact that he was getting counseling because his father was physically abusive. But when his mother remarried a black man who became a true father figure to him, a pastor to him, he even took on his stepfather's last name, Jackson. His counselor in one of the settings just sort of lamented, "It must be so hard for you to be raised by a black man," totally ignoring the fact that the white man had been beating both him and his mom. Take a listen to this story. I'm sure you'll love it just as much as I do. You mentioned that you spoke up about his ability to be a father to you in court. In social settings, church settings, did you ever have to stand up for him because you're in meetings and people were going off about him being black? I'm curious if you ever had to stand up for him.
Yeah, when they captured me and took me back to Kansas, my biological father said, "Well, the court wants you to go to counseling because you have a lot of anger." I said, "Don't you dare take me to a counselor, or I'll show you anger." And so he did, of course, took me to the court counselor.
And you showed him anger.
And when we were together, the woman said, "Well, we really want to work with you because, we know it's very hard what you've gone through, and to have a black man as people think that that's your father. And we really want to work through that with you and what you went through, and it must have been a really horrible experience."
What?
And I threw a chair and a table across the room, and I said, "Listen, you bitch."
Oh, wait, you said that, Scott?
The man out in the waiting room is the one you want to be worried about, and you better get me out of this room, and if I ever have to come back here again, I'm going to take you and him out every single day wherever I go.
And then you dropped the mic and walked out the room. Wow, Scott, you said that as a kid. You said that as a kid to a professional therapist. That's
Absolutely. I never had to go back.
Dude, listen, Scott. She went to therapy after that meeting. After you said that, she had to go talk to somebody. Oh my! I just got to process this for a minute. So you're out running in the snow because you're fighting with your father because he won't give you mail from your mom, and she's escaping because he's beating her. And the only thing they want to talk to you about is the scars of having a black man work for you, protect your mother. And the only thing that they could think about was the fact that how hard it must have been for you to be overshadowed in this home of this black. Oh my gosh, man! I'm glad you went off.
Live with a black man
and live, and you know what's okay. This is so interesting because I love the point that you're making. I mean, I just gotta just digest this for just a minute, Scott, because we're really talking about images that we have about black fathers and black figures. You know, my sister is not practicing social work now, but she's a licensed minister. She's a social worker. She's a nonprofit executive. But she says she can remember being in court and hearing DAs and other social workers saying, well, we all know that black men don't care about their children. So there's this whole thing that we're beast-like, that we're hard on kids, that we're animalistic, that all of, animal-like, all of these things. And so for you to be in a professional counseling session and someone's really trying to deprogram you and help you escape from that scar, and the person you're living with has done things that, although you're able to forgive, perhaps you still carry it. As like all those scars aren't gone. And what society focused on was this poor white kid being raised by a black man. And this is the person who risked his reputation, his ministry, his home to run and escape to Canada to protect you and your family. That's just, sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same, because those images of us as black fathers, in some circles, Scott, has not even changed very much. That's a powerful insight, man. That's really powerful.
Well, I think often what people don't understand. I think the African American community has a much stronger family structure, fathers and mothers, than the white community. And I don't think though the white community understands that. There's so much to be learned.
Hey, you know what? Inquiring black minds want to know stuff too. We've got questions for white people about things that you do and say. So I've grown up in a community that's predominantly white, and I've often heard the phrase frickin' A. So I would ask my buddies what it means, and I never really got a clear answer. So I invited some friends into the studio recently to have a discussion on what exactly does frickin' A mean and what type of emotion does it invoke within the white guys who say it. Still, there was no real consensus, but the conversation was hilarious. Check this out. Could each of you just help me to understand what frickin' A means? Eli, have you ever said frickin' A? But first of all, am I swearing? Because I probably have white listeners saying, oh, he's a pastor who said frickin' A. See, that does not resonate with me. I don't feel like I'm cussing. So like in a sermon, I could say frickin' A. Let's turn to the book of Genesis. And because that carries no dirtiness, no potty mouthiness to us.
It's pretty close to swearing. Yeah. I mean, it's the way of swearing without actually saying it, I feel like.
And is it like freaking A, frickin' A, friggin' A?
I think all of those, but mostly frickin', I think.
Yeah. Honestly, I've never said it, I promise.
You've never said frickin' A?
I don't think I have either.
But the only experience I remember, and people say it all the time, I don't really know what it means either, or why they say it. It's just when people get really mad. But I remember one time my dad came home from a church board meeting, and he said someone in the room said frickin' A tonight. Ooh. And he was like,
oh, really?
Things went down. It was a heavy meeting. I was like,
because he said it.
That's weird.
I do feel like it's also you could use it at work without swearing, sort of thing, if you're angry, you can if that's the environment, we're not gonna full on swear, but
you're gonna do it.
I'm angry.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, could you break down the etymological aspect of this word,
the way I understand
phrase?
I don't know if this.
Have you ever said it?
I've never said it, but it's been.
You guys have never said frickin' A?
Been a part of my growing up. So here's the thing. So a frickin' A is sort of like a smaller version of fucking A, right?
Oh.
In case you didn't know.
My. Oh my. Wait, this is a family show. Wait, there are black people in the room.
We can bleep that out.
Okay.
Wow. But here's the thing. But so it's the kind of thing that only.
He never said freaking A, but he just said fucking A.
But see,
right, all up on black like me. Wow.
Right. So that's something that I heard my uncle say. Right. It's something that I don't know
once.
No, several times.
Right.
But what it does, what it functions is indicating that what's about to happen is like really serious. Because what it means is like I've got
it's a line in the sand.
Yeah, like I've got a problem with what's going on. Let's stop.
Freaking A.
Right.
So is it sort of like when a black person says, "Oh hell no"?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's his social function.
Like they'll be sitting there listening, and when a black person says, "Oh hell no," and particularly if it's a woman, she starts taking her earrings off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
or
it's
putting
like,
cocoa butter on her face.
I don't know if the application of cocoa butter is involved in hell no, but that's just because of my lack of experience with it. But so the most primal version of the freaking A, or the unsort of censored one, would happen like there's a group of like older men around like a car or trying to do a task. They're arguing about what to do, and then at some point someone goes, the fucking A, and either like walks away from it, or like Zen's like, okay, what you need to do, John, is you need to use this wrench over here and do this
But
thing.
what's the A?
That seems pretty.
It just means it may be a shortened version of hey, like sort of like hey, getting attention. I don't know.
I think it's asshole.
That's what I always thought too.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna need you guys to research that
it's
because
asshole.
I've Googled
You
it.
think so?
Mm-hmm.
And like when black comedians make fun of white people, did you guys know that black comedians make fun of white people?
It's my favorite humor.
They'll say like something like, "Hey man, freaking A," and we laugh because like the kind of joke is like in black space, if a black person takes off running, I've trained tolerance. I've tried to follow me. Like, don't wait for me to explain why. Don't tweet and try to figure out where I'm going. If we're standing in like just regular space, we're in the corner talking, the breeze is coming, the sun is just falling lightly over our shoulders. If I just drop my bag and start running, follow me.
That was
in the
like
same
day
direction.
one.
You're right,
That was
just
the
day
first
one. I
thing you
told you
told
to
me.
do that because we don't have time to explain. Because that's how we get out of stuff. To me, when somebody says frickin' A, I'm gonna start ducking because I know, particularly if there's alcohol or beer involved, I know some white dude's gonna start throwing punches or pushing chairs or something like that. Somebody talked to his girlfriend. Somebody did something wrong. Somebody moved his beer.
Beer.
Somebody erased his porn. I mean, something happened. something bad happened. We're gonna get a lot of emails after this one. So
I think it is more like an aside to yourself, like a expression of frustration.
Does it sort of
Not
geek
like
you up or motivate
direct-
you to do something? Is it like what you say to like, okay, I don't really want to fight? Is it sort of like Popeye's spinach? It's like, like Popeye first he goes, that's it, that's all I can take, I can't take no more. Boom. To me, it seems like freaking A is like, you know what? This boss is beginning on my nerves. I can't get this lug off this wheel. Freaking A. I'm just going to take it off my hands.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, I think my grandpa used to like to himself up and say like, "Oh hell," and this is like the newer version of that. You just kind of like to yourself, "Freaking A," like that. That frustration.
Okay, thank you all for enlightening me because I know that there are things that you learn with some of the black icebreakers, but I've been wanting to ask a group of my white colleagues what that means for a long time. So I'll try not to say it too much around you because I don't want to be offensive. One of the hottest topics that's debated or discussed in America today is prison reform and mass incarceration. Jerome Dillard stopped by early in my podcast tenure. In fact, I think it was episode number 3, and created such a buzz that it has, to this date, it is the most downloaded episode that we have. But Jerome is the statewide director here in Wisconsin of Expo, Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing. And he just talked about his experiences as a person who went to prison 3 times, once even in the federal pen. And he just talks about what courts, legislators, individuals, police officers can all do to make this system and process more equitable for everyone. Take a listen and you'll understand why he's so effective.
Okay. My middle incarceration was 5 years in federal prison. Where I really witnessed something that touched my heart, and that was busload after busload. I worked in receiving, and so when the buses came in, I was
receiving inmates.
Yes. Where we hand out the bed rolls, uniforms, socks, underwear, and during that period, I witnessed just hundreds and hundreds of men coming into that institution. It was a time when the war on drugs was first initiated, as far as under the Reagan administration. Truth in sentencing had just came into place. I was sentenced under truth in sentencing, being sentenced in January of 1987. And within that year, I just saw thousands, really, of young African-American men coming into that institution with 30, 40 years for drugs.
And like as young as what?
It's 17, 18 years old. What they were doing at that time was using the RICO Act and gathering masses of young men in the inner city and hitting them with the RICO Act, which is a conspiracy to sell drugs. And many of them, I remember a 17-year-old crying. He was just a lookout. He was just someone who would stand out and look for the police. He had 30 years
for doing that. You know, Jerome, man, you were the first person who ever coined the phrase or the saying about childbearing years. Because often you think about women talking, mentioning, hey, I need to get married or get in a relationship because these are my childbearing years. You're the first person who I ever heard say, these men were locked up during their childbearing years.
Well, the prime of their lives.
The prime of their life. But these are men who couldn't have children.
Right.
And I mean, in terms of just how we populate our community, these were men who at 17, if you're locked up for 20 or 30 years, you're not having children. It's the prime of your life. It's when you should be in your career, but it's when you should be either starting a family, or leading or being a part of your family. And so that roundup you're talking about had a huge impact.
I looked at it. That's what moved me, because one thing that I felt in my spirit, this is a form of genocide. When young men are losing the prime of their lives, the times when they should be establishing themselves and planning their future and having children, it felt like genocide to me.
Yeah, there's a quote right here I took off the Expo website where you said, I see the prison system as a form of genocide. As I watch hope drain from the people who are permanently tagged as felons, it's no wonder they don't feel that they are a part of America.
Absolutely. And today, many of our young people are being tagged with that felon tag at 16, 17 years old. And I just see a increase in hopelessness in our community because there is discrimination in housing, discrimination in employment. And when these young men can't find a job, it's draining because they're in a state of hopelessness. Right. They feel that they're in a state of hopelessness.
It's not just that our communities have gone to hell in a handbasket. When these men who are protectors of the community were taken away. And again, when I say taken away, you and I both know we're community activists and we're leaders. If someone does a crime, there are laws. Things need to happen. Prisons are built for a reason. I mean, there are people, because of their crimes, they need to do that. But you've helped me to understand the bulk of people who are in prisons are not there for violent crimes. And the recidivism rate is for victimless crimes, for rule violations, and not for new crimes. And so when you and I are talking about mass incarceration, we are not being soft on crime. We're not saying that rapists and mass murderers and robbers should not be treated properly, through a system of rehabilitation. You and I are talking about the men who are being rounded up because they're unemployed or have unchecked mental health issues, and they're being caught with crack, they're being caught with weed, and they're going to jail for nonviolent crimes. Am I correct? Is that what you and I are talking about?
You hit the nail on the head. Many uncles and big brothers and fathers were rounded up and incarcerated, which left so many young men searching for that figure, that role model. And oftentimes they got only place that they can find that was in the streets because it was not in the homes.
But what people don't know, and again, this is what you helped me to understand, when you're in a state prison, you're counted in the census for that state,
Absolutely.
Which helps to get money from
not
the federal
the
government.
State, but that county.
Of that county. So there's a prison, let's say if there's a prison in, whatever county it's in, the prison population is counted in the census.
That's correct.
So that those numbers are increased.
They are residents.
Because those folks are not necessarily from that county.
Right.
You went to prison in counties where you didn't live. But then you can't vote on how those designated federal dollars are used in that district. So your bodies are counted to get more federal dollars, but you can't vote on it as long as you're connected in the system. So if you're on paper, on probation, you still cannot vote, correctly?
That's correct. In the state of Wisconsin.
Now, in some states you lose. If you've been a felon, you lose it forever, right?
Yeah, very few, but...
that's changing?
But I've seen one reversal.
Have you really?
Those are southern states, Louisiana, Florida.
So in Louisiana, if someone had a felony, they could never vote again?
Yep. Unless you get a pardon from the governor.
And that's not very easy.
And that's not happening.
As I look back on this year, 38 episodes later, I realized that this has been a very rewarding journey. I'm a public speaker, but when I began writing, I realized that voice was different. And then when I went to social media, that voice was a bit different. And then coming to a podcast is a different kind of voice as well. And so I'm realizing that as a communicator, you've got to be able to find the right voice in the right settings. But what this podcast, Black Like Me, has allowed me to do is to be more candid, to be more reflective, and to have meaningful dialogue with people around issues that are important to me without realizing or worrying about sounding too irreligious or using words or phrases that I shouldn't use. It's just been a chance to really pour my heart out and talk about things that I think can bring people together by understanding the things that keep us apart. I'm also very proud that this feels like a resource, that people respond to it and have responded to it like a resource. And so I want to make this more usable to the people who are listening. You know, when I first started this, I was sort of shy about asking people to subscribe and tell their friends about it. But looking back after 38 episodes and considering the comments that I've gotten or how empowered I feel in this process, I want more and more people to experience Black Like Me. So please subscribe, tell your friends to subscribe, share episodes with people, post them, retweet them, bring them up in conversations. But there's something good going on here. I feel good about it. You feel good about it. And so let's bring others to the celebration and to the party. This has been an exciting year, and I'm looking forward to continuing this powerful conversation with you in 2019.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex Gee's amazing work at www.alexgee.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.